So let's talk about then how we enable both and thinking. Mm-hmm. I made a comment in the intro about you were going to teach us how to breed our own mules, right? So we have a horse, we have a donkey. We need something that's more patient than a horse. We need something smarter than a donkey, and create a mule out of the two, right? So
right.
How do we get there?
I'm going to simplify it to 3 steps, and the book will go into much more complexity of it. But I think the first step has to be changing the question, because our questions, the way we frame our dilemma, right? We have the experience of the tension, we frame a dilemma, and then we move on. But it's how do we shift from or to and in the question? And it's not just a word; it's the assumptions underlying that word that. They have so much baggage. As soon as you say, I'm going to do the Paul Pullman Unilever, okay, do we focus on financial responsibility or social responsibility, right? You've just limited your options. Mm-hmm. Versus how might we, right? And in his world, it was much more, how might we turn around this company financially through social and environmental responsibility, right? How might we find opportunities to both make a more positive impact on the world and significantly thrill our shareholders and customers, right? He started asking whole different questions to people. And our questions are either limiting or opening. And I do think that's a really critical piece, is changing the question. Mm-hmm. I think the second step is, we call it separating and connecting. So I always have I do picture the yin yang quite a bit here, is can you pull apart these opposing sides and really dive in and ask, at our best, what does each provide us, right? And in that separation, if that was all we do, what's the potential negative consequences? And this is an exercise I work with organizations quite a bit on, because as soon as you've done that exercise, that looks like the exercise you might do before you make a trade-off, pros and cons. But by really separating them and challenging yourself to get at the best of both each world and the worst of each world, you see that you need the other. Because if you lay it out, what you'll find is that the downside of one is the upside of the other, and vice versa. And that sort of aha is a real shifter, because you realize, okay, now I got to connect. I need to think about, how am I going to hold these together? Mm-hmm. Right? So I'll go back to the Unilever example, because I just love the way he did it. I'm an admirer of Pullman. But he said, look, I'll start with the connecting. We have to do this. We touch 2 billion consumers a day at the time. So he said, we must do both. And he built the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. And that plan was really rather simple. The plan said, we're going to double in 10 years. We're going to double our profits and cut in half our environmental footprint. And people literally said, you're crazy. It doesn't work that way. The bigger the company, the more harm you do. And he said, no, we're going to do both. And then he separated. He made separating just an absolute art in that company. Because every time they'd go into, say, launch a new product, he'd say, okay, show me the financial benefits. Show me how we're going to own that market, how we're going to grow customers, how we're going to cut costs. And then he'd say, and show me, demonstrate the social benefits. Tell me, okay, how are we going to reduce water, reduce energy, reduce pollution, transportation, waste, and engage the local community, right? And so he'd make them really line those two up, which was beautiful and challenging. And then the third piece, which is going to get to your point, Scott, about the mules, is reconsider the options. How do we start to shift what we assume is the end goal from a trade-off to something different? And we talk about mules and tightrope walking, right, as the new approach, or expand your repertoire of what's possible. So the mules absolutely are the way I think most people, when you think about both and thinking, you assume a mule because it's the best of both worlds. Right? It's some hybrid, creative integration that is stronger than a horse, smarter than a donkey, right? Is the idea. And when they happen, they're beautiful, right? They're really creative, synergistic ahas. I know I'm overusing, but I hope the Unilever example illustrates. But with Pullman, one of their mules that was brilliant is they were taking, I think it was surf detergent into Western Africa. And they were the first firm to come up with sachets, those little packets, right? But the reason that was a mule is that, they were fantastic from an environmental social responsibilities, right, at the time. Now, I think they've learned from this, which I'll get to, but far less waste, easier to transport, so less pollution, much easier for the local retailers in these communities to sell, and they cost less, right? Significantly reduced costs, and customers loved them, right? So they found something. But here's the limit to the mule. The limit to the mule is, and it really is beautiful even in the metaphor, is mules are sterile. So they're temporary. They're one-offs. Even in the case of sachets, I was actually seeing this the other day. Unilever's realized they're not sustainable enough. They're filling landfills. So we got to keep experimenting. That's okay, right? I mean, it's okay to keep experimenting. It was still better than what they were going to do. And now they're just going to keep getting better, but it's a one-off. More often, what we see, and I certainly see this, and I try to live this, is we call tightrope walking. If you think about a tightrope walker, and I don't do a lot of official tightrope walking, they keep moving forward with their eyes on a goal on the horizon. And in moving forward, they take these micro shifts left and right? Just back and forth, back and forth. So in the case of Unilever, if when times are tight, we're gonna maybe lean in a little bit more into the financial. We gotta make sure the costs are right and we're hitting our targets. And when resources are flush, we're gonna put more money. We're gonna reinvest into the social innovations that we're doing. We're gonna get more creative on that. But the sustainable living plan serves as a guardrail, because if you lean too far on either side, you're falling off. Mm-hmm. And you got to keep those vicious cycles in mind, right? So you're how do you keep moving? Because it's the moving that's important in that regard. And I think we do this all the time. But I'm not saying tightrope walking is easy either, because talking to Paul about this, he would say, communication's hard, because people, back to the politics, will say, are you flip-flopping? Are you sending mixed messages? And he was a broken record, and he will admit it in the best possible way. He would start the meetings reminding them, remember the goal? Double the profits, cut in half the environmental footprint. And then he'd say, and guess what? It's quarterly earnings time. We got some hard work to do. We're going to focus in a bit on the finance side, right? And so that's the way he was moving. He would say, yeah, we're going to focus more today on X than Y, but we got a big picture. Remember where we're going? And work that way. I see this with really good leaders when they're doing this. Communication's an art. Mm-hmm. And keeping people in mind of what's at the end goal and how you're making those micro shifts, so they understand it is both, and it's some more like juggling sometimes, right? You're not necessarily holding them both at the exact same time.